Welcome back to the show, everybody, from a Blanket Fort recording studio in a one-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood. This is People Pleaser. I'm Austin Archer. Today on the program, we will be talking about the death of satire, incrementalism, and escalation. Okay, so last week on the show, on the last episode of the show, we talked about how good people let bad things happen. How do otherwise good people who have the capability to do good things, support bad things, support bad leaders, support bad policy. How does this happen? We talked about the various different kinds of people that allow for evil things to take root, scaled them from safest to least safe to most dangerous. And this week on the show, rather than focusing on us, on the populace, on the proletariat, I figured we should turn our sights on the mechanisms of power in our society and look at what they are doing. How do they do the things that they do? What is behind their mechanisms and their plans and, their strategy? How do we get here? How did they manage to get here? And where here is, we're going to start from where we are, which is how do we arrive at the point where empathy is a bad word? If you're not aware, that is where we are. That is actually where we are. We got the TikTok digital studio audience here, just in case you're curious. YouTube, they're right here. We got about a little over 100 people in the TikTok digital studio audience. Hello, YouTube, or hello, TikTok. If you're not aware, empathy is now a bad word in conservative America. Fully, they are calling it toxic empathy and the sin of empathy. In conservative Christian America in 2025, they've managed to mainstream the concept that the founding fundamental characteristic and principle behind compassion is a sin. How do you get to this full-on stage of absolute Orwellian doublespeak where up is down, where night is day, where cats are dogs? You can't really satirize it, right? You can't exaggerate what they're doing any more than what they're doing. I was trying to think today, how would I push this further? And it's just almost like they're going to start calling love bad. The left has been saying for a very long time, love is love. Love is good. Love wins. In the fight for marriage equality or in the fight for just queer visibility, it's all about, and inclusivity, it's all about love, right? Love is love. Love wins. Love is a good thing. Jesus commanded you to love one another as he has loved you. Love is what Christianity is supposed to be all about. Making empathy a sin is a hop, skip, and a jump away from saying love is bad, love is hate. You need to have the strength not to love. You need to have the strength and the determination and the commitment to your God and your beliefs to hate properly, to hate the way that your God wants you to hate. And I feel like that sounds really hyperbolic, but here we are in a reality where they're trying to tell us that empathy is a sin that we need to be scared of. And so I don't, you can't really be hyperbolic with these people. You can't really push it too far. And that brings me to sort of the top of the show here, which is the death of satire. This is something that you've heard me talk about on the show a lot. You've heard a lot of people on the internet talk about this, that satire can't really exist in the Trump era of American politics because anything that you could think to write into a comedy sketch to exaggerate what he does and the twisted, deranged behavior of the people in his world, they always top it. They always, SNL's always too late by the time the show hits air on Saturday. It's like whatever he did on Monday that they start writing sketches for, he's done something crazier by Wednesday. And then they switch the sketch to the crazier thing he did on Wednesday. But by Friday, he's even topped that thing. And you can't really keep up. And this has been going on for a while. I remember, one of my favorite sketches of all time, or jokes of all time, I should say, from one of my favorite TV shows of all time, season 1 of 30 Rock. This is 2004, 2005. In the first season, they have a fake show on NBC, on their fictionalized version of NBC called MILF Island. It's a reality TV show where teenagers compete to win the affections of MILFs on an island, on a desert island. And there's a great Jack Donaghy line where they're all rooting for this MILF named Deborah. It's spelled Deborah, but pronounced Deborah. And Jack Donaghy's watching MILF Island, and he goes, "Oh, Deborah's got the best backstory. Can you believe that before all this, she was just a struggling actress in Los Angeles?" And MILF Island in 2005 was a satirical heightening of the reality TV craze that kind of took root in the late 90s. So you had shows like Big Brother, and you had shows like, Survivor, and you had all these, the Real World and Jersey Shore and all of this stuff. MILF Island was a satirical heightening of that absurdity, pointing at like how absurd reality TV was getting, how out of control it was getting. And wouldn't it be crazy if we had a show where people compete for MILFs on an island? Well, in 2025, as far back as I think the show debuted in like 2023, there is a show now on TLC called MILF Manor. It just had its second season. And I watched every episode of the second season, and it was great. But MILF Manor is what you think it is. It's a bunch of MILFs in a house being fought over by younger men. They're not teenagers like they were in 30 Rock. That would be illegal. But they are, men who are like 19 and 20 and 21 competing for the affections of women who are no younger than 45 years old. Like, there is no woman on the show that is younger than 45, and they have to have kids. They have to be real, genuine MILFs. And in the first season, the twist of MILF Manor was that they show up for the first episode. All the MILFs are meeting all the young men. This is real. I'm not making this up. And the twist of the show is the young men who applied to be part of the show didn't know that their moms were going to be one of the MILFs in the manor. So they get there and they're like, oh, I can't wait to hook up with some MILFs. And they're meeting all the different MILFs. And then their mom walks in and they're like, Mom! And so all the boys that were on the show they were the son of one of the moms. So they had to like be competing for the other MILFs while their mom watched them compete for all these other MILFs, and while their mom also was hooking up with the other boys. And that was season 1. So then like season 2, you got to heighten it. You got to figure out, we can't just do the same gimmick. So all the boys show up to the manor, all the MILFs are showing up, they're all getting to know each other. It's a really greasy, gross time, and it's really fun. But then a bunch of other dudes show up, and guess who the other dudes are in MILF Manor season 2? It's the dads, dude. It's the boys' dads now that are on the show. So the boys have to compete against their single dads for the affection of the MILFs. And you can't satirize that. Like, you can't do a comedy sketch that heightens that, dude. Like, we've peaked out at that. What does this have to do with empathy becoming a bad word in at the beginning of the second Trump administration? The culmination, the fullness, the arrival of Trump's Reich. What does this have to do with all of that? Well, somebody shared a Key and Peele sketch the other day, and I just was kind of blown away at how many times Key and Peele have written sketches when they had their show on this. I mean, their show went off the air probably 10 years ago. And how many of their sketches where at the time they were doing a satirical heightening of the political reality in America, and so many have come true. There might be more than this, but what I'm aware of, first is like the handshake sketch. There's this really great Key and Peele sketch where Barack Obama is, giving handshakes to people in a line and going like, how do you do? How do you do? How do you do? And every time there's a black person, he has to stop and give them, like, he has to dap them up and do like a whole spiel with them. And then when it's white people, it's, how do you do? Nice to see you. Hi, nice to meet you. And then in real life, Barack Obama went into a locker room after a basketball game, and that happened. All of the white guys, he was like, oh, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And all the black guys, he was like, hey, bring it in. And that's like a pretty innocent one, right? But then there's another Obama sketch from the Key and Peele show that I always thought was great. And this is how it felt when Barack Obama was the president. They did this sketch where Obama is meeting with the heavily conservative Congress. Obama had a very staunchly opposed, to him, heavily conservative Congress that made it really, really hard on him to get anything done while he was president. And he's meeting with these guys, and his strategy for the meeting is to say the opposite of everything that he wants, because he knows that these guys will ideologically be forced to disagree with him. And they're not even going to realize that they're actually agreeing to what he wants them to agree. It's just like a very simple concept. It's just opposite day. Like, he says, well, well, gentlemen, I think that government should be really small and should be reserved and, we should kind of cut the budget. And they all go, we disagree, Mr. President. And he goes, well, gentlemen, you drive a hard bargain. I guess big government it is. And it's one thing after another like that as it escalates. And they have it's like they're bound by the ideological law of being a modern conservative to say we disagree, even though they know they're getting played. Then when Joe Biden was in the middle of his presidential term, I'm gonna say something here that maybe people aren't ready to hear, and that's that we're going to look back on the Biden-Harris administration and see that it was a very, very successful administration. They did so much in 4 years. It was amazing what they were able to recover from after the disaster that was the 4 years of the Trump administration and the economic fallout of the global pandemic, and the amount of progressive legislation that they were able to pass in spite of the staunch opposition of Republicans. But there was a great moment in like Biden's second year at a State of the Union address where on stage in front of Congress, he said, well, there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle who want to cut Medicare, and they don't want to have Medicare and Social Security. And you may remember that famously the Republicans stood on their feet and booed him and said, "You're a liar." Marjorie Taylor Greene was wearing this like villainous white fur coat and screaming, "Liar, you're a liar." And he went, "Oh, okay, my bad. I guess we all agree that Social Security and Medicare should not be on the chopping block." And Democrats stood on their feet and cheered, and it was like this totally thug life moment, this amazing moment, well, probably one of the coolest moments from the entire Biden-Harris administration, and it was kind of the birth of Dark Brandon, and it was literally the Key and Peele sketch, baiting conservatives into calling him a liar, saying, well, you guys want to cut Medicare. And they go, no, we don't. You're a liar. Oh, I guess you don't. I guess you don't then. And just, because these people are infantile in their strategy and in their approach to politics, that it's all ideology based. It's all just whatever you say, I say the opposite. You say up, I say down. You say red, I say blue. Just whatever you say, I say the opposite. Doesn't matter what it is, And he used that little opposite day trick against them. Not that it actually was able to translate into any long lasting legislation that will actually protect Medicare, because here we fucking are, and we just reelected the Trump back into the White House, and he's going to gut that thing. So, but it was a nice little cosmetic moment to behold. Then, you might remember Jason Aldean released a song called Try That in a Small Town. This was, I did a video on this. I did several videos on this. Lots of creators did videos on this. This was a wildly racist song that was all about, it was kind of making dog whistles and allusions to sundown towns and talking about how, kind of making allusions to left-wing activists and radicals and Black Lives Matter protesters, and saying, try that in a small town and see how far you make it down the road. And the music video was famously shot in front of a location of a famous lynching. And so all of these people were going, first of all, this song is racist as fuck. Without even looking at the music video, it just sounds racist as fuck. He's talking about good old boys raised right, and how if you come into his small town, you're not going to make it out of town. And it's just, like a very, very dark song that's really calling back to a very dark time in American history. Not that we've actually outgrown it or anything like that. But then if you watch the music video, it's like, and people tried to say he didn't know that he was filming in front of this site of this famous lynching. And it's like, give me a fucking break. He's not so much dog whistling as he is blowing a foghorn. It was very unsubtle, but while that happened, while people like me were saying this is a very racist song, this is an obviously racist song, of course conservatives were there to try to gaslight and obfuscate and say, what do you guys think everything's racist? You guys think, oh my God, you guys are so pathetic. Key and Peele sketch, where Keegan-Michael Key is playing country songs for his friend Jordan, and all of the songs are very racist. And it's like very clearly racist, and Jordan Peele keeps stopping him and going, hey man, whoa, stop, that's racist, that song's racist. And Keegan-Michael Key has to keep explaining why the song's not actually racist and why he's hearing it wrong. That's the third one. The fourth one just happened. So This feels like Key and Peele taking that formula, that country music sketch formula, and heightening it even more. Doing a satirical heightening of like, what's a next level up of friend who doesn't realize his country music is subtly racist. And the next level up is they have a sketch that is so terribly unsubtle. There's nothing subtle about it. Jordan goes over to hang out with his friend Keegan. Keegan opens the door and he's got a Hitler mustache. Fully unambiguous Hitler mustache. Jordan immediately goes, "Whoa, what's with the Hitler mustache?" And immediately the gaslighting starts, and it's the same exact sketch as the country music one, but it's just heightened to a ridiculous degree. He explains, "No, it's a Charlie Chaplin mustache. Hitler's not the only one that gets to have this. It's Charlie Chaplin. I'm a silent movie era fan." Then, he goes, "Okay, fine." Walks into the house. The dog comes out. It's a German Shepherd, and it's barking at Jordan. He goes, "Whoa, when'd you get a German Shepherd?" And he goes, "Adolf, stand down." And then he's like, "Your dog's name is Adolf, dude?" And he's like, "No, Adolf Marx. Harpo Marx, the Marx brothers, And then they go into the kitchen and there's a swastika flag in the kitchen. And he goes, "Dude, swastika flag in the kitchen." He goes, "This is a comedy prop from the movie The Producers." Terribly unsubtle sketch. Very funny sketch, but nothing subtle about it. And it's heightening the bit as high as you can possibly heighten it. It's taking that bit as far as you can. It's the most hyperbole you can possibly do. Well, not in 2025. Satire is well and truly dead in 2025 because here we sit watching the richest man in the world do a completely unambiguous, completely unmistakable Sig Heil salute on the inaugural stage behind the presidential pulpit. And here we are again with conservative America blowing smoke up our ass and trying to tell us that that's not what it was, that it was an autistic stim, that it was a Roman salute, that he was throwing his heart out to the crowd. Give me a fucking break. This can't be where we are, and yet it is. You can't heighten the bit anymore. So the question of the show, the question we're going to try to walk through is, how did we get here? How did the Trump era push us beyond the point of being able to adequately satirize politics? How did we arrive here in this post-truth Orwellian double-speak state? Because that is where we are. Words no longer mean what they mean. Truth no longer, has the same universally understood basic logic to it that it once did. How does this happen? Well, the first part of this process is a decades-long process of incrementalism. It starts slowly but steadily. It's consistent, drawn out over decades. And you start with kind of nebulous ideas. You can see this in like the Southern strategy, right? The party shift that happened when they realized that the Republican Party could do well in Southern states by appealing to the working men and working people and working class of those states that were deeply racist, that were still kind of seditionistic and separatists, that still had sore feelings about the Civil War and still wanted to, if they had their way, they'd like to have slaves if they could. That's where sundown towns exist. They understood the strategy of that. So what they start doing is they start, waging wars on poverty and drugs, these sort of nebulous, hard to pin down concepts of like, well, it's our cities have been infiltrated by loiterers and hobos everywhere and people on drugs. And it's all code speak. It's all dog whistles for the racial other. And it's all things that are tapping into people's fear of the other without overtly saying it. And with that, you start to couple in fears of other geopolitical nebulous concepts like communism and socialism and Marxism. And you never fully explain what you mean specifically by these things. It's the same thing with like poverty and drugs. It's kind of like George Bush's war on terror. It's like, what does that mean? Who are we at war with specifically? When does the war end? What is the objective of the war? How do we know when the war has been won? How do you officially eradicate terror? How do you eradicate drugs? You can't. Like, people are going to be doing drugs. Alcohol is legal, and it's one of the most lethal drugs in the world. People be doing drugs. What do you mean? How do you have a war on poverty? How do you other the very concept of like something that is so integral to the formation of capitalism, something like poverty? And then at least, in the abstract, people have an abstract understanding of what poverty is, of what drugs are. But like nobody fucking knows. None of these people who think that socialism or communism or Marxism is a dirty word actually know what these concepts are. They've just been carefully taught to distrust these things, and not just distrust these things, to despise these things, to be as afraid of these words as they are, or as they should be, of like Nazism, of white nationalism, of Christian nationalism. They're taught to be as afraid of socialism as they are, as people on the left are, to be afraid of fascism. And you sort of just, over decades of time, incrementally ratchet up the terminology and the dog whistles, and you keep it behind a smoke screen, you test the boundaries, but it's incremental. It's the frog in the pot, right? That whole analogy. And a lot of people, this analogy where it's an experiment that was done where they put frogs in a pot of water, incrementally turned up the temperature of the water until the water was boiling and the frogs died, but the frogs never noticed that the water was boiling because the temperature was turned up incrementally. Well, in actual reality, apparently, the scientists who did that study removed the parts of the frog's brains that allowed them to sense the pain or something like that. They tampered with the pain centers in the frog's brain. So it's like maybe a tainted study. I don't know. But it's a great analogy, not only because it works to describe how incrementalism actually happens, but also because I definitely believe that this decades-long process of incrementalism is also a decades-long lobotomy that has been given to conservative America. They have been lobotomized by right-wing media, by shows like the Joe Rogan podcast, by people like Jordan Peterson, by the social media universe of the right wing, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, the Paul brothers. They've been lobotomized by these people to the point where they can no longer feel the proper sensation when the temperature doesn't just get cranked up incrementally, but the knob gets broken off and it's flames all over the house. They're literally calling empathy a bad word and they don't see it. They're like, yeah, empathy is bad, I suppose, because they've been lobotomized. They no longer feel any changes, but we're not there yet. We're not to the point where we do away with incrementalism and we jump into exponential escalation. But let's get into that. I think we understand that that's how it begins. It begins with incrementalism. It begins with these kind of code speaks. It begins with kind of term switching. It's not anti-choice. It's not anti-bodily autonomy. It's pro-life. You're not attacking queer people. You don't hate queer people. You don't hate gayness or trans people. You're standing up for traditional values and the traditional family. You kind of couch it in these socially acceptable ways that still sound reasonable and like there's a reasonable bedrock to them. You're not anti-Semitic, but you do fear a kind of secret, nebulous, nefarious other that runs and controls the liberal media and floods our culture and our society with liberal messages. And whether you know it or not, that is a anti-Semitic dog whistle. That's kind of the thing about dog whistles, is like they work for the people that they're meant to work for, but also they're subtle enough that the people that they're working on don't even know that they're being dog whistled at. Usually the people that see it as a dog whistle are like the people who are aware of what's going on, the people who see through the code. We see what's being actually said in Jason Aldean's song, Try That in a Small Town. We can hear every single word loud and clear, but they can't hear it. They hear the code speak, and that's why it's effective. It's like brainwashing. It's like subliminal messaging. And that's how incrementalism works, slowly but consistently over decades. That's how you perform a lobotomy over the course of several decades or several years. But then we get to 2015 with Trump coming down the escalator, and pretty much overnight, we do away with incrementalism, and we just launch straight into exponential escalation. Everything over the last 10 years has been how much can we drop the smokescreen? How much can we drop the code speak? How much can we drop the, the plausible deniability and just push the boundaries? So, almost immediately, Trump begins to dispatch with code speak. He starts to test boundaries. He starts to, will they still love me if I mock a disabled reporter openly on stage? Oh, they will. All right, good. Will they still love me if I call Mexicans rapists and killers? They will. They like me more? Oh, okay. Sounds good. Great. Will they love me if I call Africa a continent of shithole countries? Oh, they love that one. Cool. Awesome. Cool. There's nothing code speak about it. It's mask off racism. It's mask off xenophobia. It's mask off, appealing to people's hatred, appealing to people's anger without couching it in some kind of smokescreen or dog whistle. And that's why all these people said, what I like about him is he says what he means, because these people, remember, are not very smart. They have been lobotomized by right-wing media, but they know something's off. Something in them knows something's off in the way that the majority of politicians speak to them. They don't understand what the code actually means a lot of the time, but they do recognize it as not genuine speech. They're like, I feel like you're saying something that you're not actually willing to say, and I'd appreciate it if you would be more straightforward. Enter Donald Trump, a guy who just goes, oh, I'll be more straightforward. I'll say exactly what you're hoping I'll say. And they all just immediately go, yes, that feels good. That feels good. But it's because they were primed by decades of incrementalism that they were ready to just have somebody, and they knew we're strong enough as a base to just be able to say this out loud and proud. And what's funny is they're still fucking cowards. They're still like they still hide behind private profiles. They still rarely have profile pictures. They're still cowards, but they're excited that their leaders are being loud and proud about this stuff. Almost immediately too, in the Trump era, liberals and leftists start to sound the alarm that this is fascistic rhetoric and dangerous. We start to say, oh, they're going mask off. They're not doing code speak anymore. And almost immediately people are talking about the death of satire and how, it's like every other day there's a new unprecedented event happening where you're going, I've never seen a president or a presidential candidate or a politician ever say anything or do anything even close to that level. This is kind of history-making stuff in the worst way possible, and we're overwhelmed by it because there's so much of it. Then we flash forward to, he gets elected. We flash forward to Trump being voted out, and, we see kind of the full extent of his depravity and the nature of his hunger for power, and the full might of what happens when he, mobilizes his supporters. And we see what happens with January 6th, and they try to overthrow the country, the government, and overthrow democracy in his name and instill him as a dictator unsuccessfully, but they definitely try. They definitely make a move for it. After that, basically manages to pull off, over the course of the Biden-Harris administration, this Orwellian maneuver of memory holing January 6th, memory holing the insurrection, and getting the Republican Party to bend the knee and agree that it didn't happen, and agree that it wasn't actually what we all saw on TV. And you have Republican senators and Congress people saying on TV, I don't know. I think it was a peaceful demonstration. I've seen footage and images of January 6th where it looked very peaceful. And you have, news reporters on TV going, you were there. You were physically present. You were evacuated from the building. You witnessed it with your own two eyes. And them saying, no, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't see that. And it's all, happening in front of us, where they're just pretending like this stuff didn't actually happen. While this is happening, Elon Musk, the grandson of members of the Canadian Nazi Party who left Canada because they wanted to be a part of apartheid South Africa, where they could be part of the ruling ethnic class in apartheid South Africa. They wanted to go live where white people had special privileges over black people, because that's how racist Elon Musk's grandparents were. This guy, who grows up to become the world's wealthiest person, buys his own social media platform and immediately floods it with neo-Nazis and hate speech, and starts cozying up to Nazis. And again, the left is sounding the alarms, going, this isn't good, this is bad, this is really, really scary, this is actual real-life Nazi shit in plain view. No code speak, no couching it behind a smoke screen. This is what it is. Now we are where we are, right? That's sort of like a truncated, brief recounting of the timeline and the events. What's interesting is, over the last 10 years, from Trump riding down the escalator in 2015 to Elon Musk doing the Sig Heil on the stage at the inauguration, a lot of people right now, I think, are looking at the situation and going, how did this happen? Were there signs? Did we miss it? I know that a lot of us are going, oh, we saw it. We were watching it the entire time. There were definitely signs, but it was, Whereas the incrementalism part of this, the decades-long period of incrementalism, of slowly ratcheting up the rhetoric, happened kind of in a way where there was always plausible deniability here. This escalation over the last 10 years has been hiding in plain sight. It's just been right there for anyone who wanted to look at it the entire time. And it has not, much like the Key and Peele sketch, it's been terribly unsubtle. It has not been subtle at all. So let's do a brief recount of a timeline of just Trump, not even Elon, just Trump's association with the Nazi Party and allusions to Hitler and the rise of the Third Reich in 1930s Germany. Let's sort of parallel those two, and this is just a brief recounting of events, but there's a lot of them, so hang with me here. So starting July 14th, 2015, right after Trump rides down that golden escalator and says that he's running for president and everyone thinks this must be a joke, this can't be real, no way, what a silly thing, the Trump team posts a photo to Facebook announcing his presidential run, and the photo it's an image of his face in front of a grand military, and people look at the photo and go, the military that they used in this photo is the Nazi military. It's stock photos of Nazi soldiers, and the Trump team quickly deletes the photo and then apologizes for it. And they say, some intern, they blame it on an intern, accidentally put the wrong image on there. It's like, okay, weird gaffe to start your political career on, but okay, sure. I would say this is testing the waters. How much can we go mask off from day one? By 2016, neo-Nazis are showing up at Trump rallies, and yelling, "Hail Trump," and doing an arm salute to him, and Trump starts to direct his faithful members at his rallies to do a one-arm salute to him and to pledge their allegiance to him. And so people are doing this salute where they raise their arm in the air. They're not doing it like the extended out version, but it's like this raised arm in the air. It's this pledge of allegiance. It's still a right arm salute and pledge to this leader. Very weird behavior, very obviously fascistic behavior that's not normal at all in modern American politics, and obviously very alarming, and people are pointing it out. January 19th, 2017, Sebastian Gorka, a top Trump aide, appears on TV wearing a badge, tunic, and ring of the Order of Vitesse, which is a Hungarian organization that was under the direction of the German Nazi Party. And again, this is just another thing where people go, hey, this guy's wearing a lot of paraphernalia of this Hungarian organization that has ties to the Nazis. And the Trump organization goes, oh, geez, that was something about his family, his heritage, that was taken out of context, and it's just like all these coincidences are lining up. And again, none of these are in code. These are out loud. These are hiding in plain sight. It's just full-blown Nazi stuff. At one point, the Trump administration unveiled their new symbol. It was like the centerpiece at a rally that he spoke at, and it was almost indistinguishable from the eagle on top of the swastika symbol. I'll put them on the screen. They'll be side by side. You can see them. Whatever graphic designer you had working on that, there's just if you're a graphic designer and you're making graphic design for a political campaign and a political team, you always check to make sure that the thing you're making cannot be misconstrued as accidentally being like, whoops, we're Nazis. You always make sure that whatever design you're coming up with is far enough away from a swastika that it couldn't accidentally be looked at and go, that kind of looks like, you add maybe one thing to it, that looks like a swastika. This thing is like, it's only missing the swastika. Everything else about it is like spot on. And it's just the amount of coincidences that would have to happen for that graphic designer and for that entire team, for no one to recognize it and go, it looks pretty close to the one that Hitler used. It's pretty unbelievable. And that's because that's just, they've been doing this stuff from the very beginning. In between 2017 and 2020, Trump compares the size of the audiences at his rallies to Hitler's and laments that his aides are not as loyal to him as the Nazis were to Hitler. He's saying shit like this all the time. June 18th, 2020, the campaign posts an image using a common Nazi symbol, which is an upside-down red triangle to point out enemies. This is just like the first image they tweeted out after he first announced that he was going to run for president. They tweet this out, and a lot of people point at it and go, that red triangle was used in Nazi propaganda to point at enemies, nefarious enemies of the people, and you guys just used it in your graphic. And again, they immediately delete the post and deny any knowledge that those symbols are the same thing. Again, any graphic designer that's working for a political campaign checks these things, has to check these things in order to be any good whatsoever at their job. November to December 2023, Trump calls political opponents vermin and says that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. I mean, Jesus Christ, do you remember that one? Who does that fucking sound? Do I even need to say it? Do I even need to point out what saying my political opponents are vermin that need to be exterminated and that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country? It's a word for word. Someone just pointed out in the comments on the TikTok live stream. It is word for word. It is straight up Hitlerian othering of the enemy within, and talking about eugenics and talking about creating an ethno-state for white people. And it is, again, entirely unsubtle, not in code speak at all. It's word for word. And because of this gaffe where he says immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, he becomes the first former president, at this point he was a former president, to ever have to publicly clarify that he's never read Mein Kampf. And that's just, Trump's always doing these unprecedented things. He's always becoming the first president to do some crazy thing that a president should never do. And this is another one where, we've never had a president of this country in the 20th century or the 21st century that had to go on the news and be like, listen, I don't even know what's in Mein Kampf. The reason why he had to say, I've never read Mein Kampf, is because poisoning the blood of the country is just, it's like in every chapter of Mein Kampf. It's constantly talking about how the nefarious other within immigrants, queer people, Jews are poisoning the blood of the homeland. So people were like, you got that out of Mein Kampf, didn't you? And he was like, I've never read that book. And March 2024. Let's move on. March 2024, according to John Kelly, Trump's former chief of staff. This isn't just like an intern who's getting him coffee. This is his chief of staff. This is Doug Stamper from House of Cards, okay? Trump once said that Hitler did some good things. This is, another cool thing about Donald Trump is that so many of his ex-staffers have turned on him. And this is another great thing that he has in common with Hitler, is Hitler was constantly surrounded by people who were willing to sell him out and be traitors in order to get their own deals with foreign governments of trying to maybe get a softer extraction. Like, hey, if I can get repatriated to your country and I don't have to go to prison, I'll give you all the dirt you want on Hitler, even though these people were fully in the Hitler team and fully on the Hitler team and in the Hitler administration, if you want to call it. They were willing to sell him out because they had no integrity and they had no real moral code of any high value to speak of. And Trump's very much the same. He has so many former people who have worked for him, who have sold him out because they thought at one point or another that the Trump ship was going down. They bet wrong, at least so far they did, and they wanted to save their own asses. It's not because they actually, grew a spine or grew some integrity or grew a conscience. It's just because they don't have any integrity. They don't have any loyalty. And, they're all just kind of spineless, bad people. That's an incomplete brief list. That list that I just went down, that's not even all of it. It's not even half of it. And all of that stuff, by the way, is mirrored in the story of Adolf Hitler. It's all mirrored almost beat for beat, even down to the fact that Hitler was voted out of power, led an insurrection against his government, was tried for treason for that insurrection, convicted as a felon, and then reelected into power. And guess when Hitler's trial was for treason? It was in 1924. Which is 100 years before Donald Trump's in 2024. I mean, it is like to the T, history repeating itself. And because we live in this Orwellian nightmare, we have a bunch of lobotomized morons who are telling us, no, it's not, and not to believe the evidence of our eyes and ears. But yeah, that's an incomplete, truncated list. So maybe you're asking yourself at this point, if I just went through all that stuff, maybe you're thinking, it can't be that extensive. Where'd you get all that information? If you're a person who's thinking, how did I not hear about any of this until just now? If you're a person who saw Elon Musk do that Sig Heil salute on stage and you thought it felt like it came out of nowhere, you felt like we were completely lacking any context for that. By the way, even with Elon, we could do the same thing. We did a little bit. We talked about him buying the social media app, flooding it with Nazis, cozying up to Nazis, and that, his grandparents being Nazis, him growing up in apartheid South Africa, all this stuff. But we could even go deeper. Like, Elon's been cozying up to the current far-right party in literal Germany. Days after he did that Nazi salute on stage, he spoke at a conference for that far-right party that has ties to the Nazi party, and he told them, you guys should not be ashamed of your Nazi history. You should be loud and proud about it. And there is a photo from that rally that I think makes me believe in God. It is a unedited photo. All the people in the audience, Elon's face was on a giant screen, much like Big Brother in 1984. It's incredibly terrifying. He's on a giant, stadium-sized screen, and there's an audience full of people waving flags and signs, and one of the flags on a pole in the shadow, the silhouette of the flag gets over Elon's face and makes a perfect Hitler mustache, and somebody caught that in a photo. They caught an image of that, and I saw that photo and I thought, that makes me think there has to be a God, and God wants us to know that Elon Musk definitely is a Nazi, because that's fucking insane. Elon Musk is a big progenitor of simulation theory, of the theory that life is all a simulation. That shit is simulation theory. Like, what? Elon Musk does a Sig Heil salute and announces himself as a Nazi on the world stage, then goes and speaks at a Nazi conference, and at that conference, where he looks like Big Brother on a screen, a flag covers his face and does a Hitler stash? Give me a fucking break. Again, this is why you can't satirize this stuff. You can't heighten that. Reality has gone beyond the bounds of satire. But again, I digress. Going back to, if you are somehow a person who feels like this current moment in history, this current moment in time, kind of came out of nowhere, if you feel a little bit blindsided by all the Nazi talk, by everybody going, oh, real life, actual Nazis are in the White House, if you feel like it's an over-exaggeration, or you feel like, how come this is the first time hearing of it? It's not. The entire time that this has been going on, the entire 10 years of the Trump era of American politics, this stuff has been happening. That timeline that I just told you was happening, and it was being reported on. It was being reported on with some regularity and with a lot of volume and effort. There were a lot of people putting a lot of effort into letting you know that this was happening. But the reason why it's excusable if you somehow missed it, if you somehow missed all of my videos and all of, left-wing medias and left-wing social media creators' videos over the last 10 years, if you somehow missed the message, the reason why it's excusable is because that's also by design. That's the most nefarious part of this Trump machine, is that the whole thing about doing something insane on Monday and then topping it on Wednesday and then topping it on Friday is so that it muddies the water. It's to create chaos. It's to overwhelm you. It's to tire you out. So there's two big reasons why you might not have ever heard any of the stuff that I just said, and why Elon's salute on that stage might have been the first you've ever heard of any of this. One is that method right there, where they just overwhelm and exhaust you. That, like, from 2015, from the jump, before he was even elected in 2016, a lot of people were just fucking tired of hearing this guy's name and looking at his face and listening to his voice, because he was in the news every single day with some new crazy thing. And like 1 out of 15 stories would be he did something that was quite Nazi-ish, or that sounded like something Hitler said once or did once. And the rest of the stories were just other forms of depraved behavior that no person who should ever be a serious candidate for president should ever do. But you're overwhelmed by it, and you don't know which stories to pay attention to or to listen to, or if you can even handle listening to any of them. So you just sort of close yourself off to it, and that's how you miss it. And the other way that you miss it is, and this is straight out of the Hitler playbook, you may be aware and familiar with the common Trump catchphrase, fake news. Anytime the news reported on this accurately, reported on this stuff going on, Trump called the media fake news, called them straight to their faces. Journalists would ask him questions and say, hey, sir, you said that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country, and that's like a quote straight out of Mein Kampf. Do you want to comment on that? And he would reply, well, you're fake news. Well, you guys are fake news. You're just fake news. And do you know where he got fake news from? Do you know like where the origins of a politician, a fascistic politician, gaslighting and smoke screening and calling the press fake news when they call him out for his behavior comes from? There's a German word called Lügenpresse. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Lügenpresse? And what it means, it translates in English to lying press. So fake news, lying press. And I'll give you one guess who coined that term. And we'll do a little da na 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 da na 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 na. It was Hitler. Lügenpresse, lying press. And Hitler told his people when they would report accurately on what he was doing in the 20s and the 30s, the press is lying. The press lies. The press can't be trusted. They are fake news. Again, we live in a post-satire world. If you wanted to satirize a fascistic despot rising to power in the 21st century who was mirroring Hitler, you would have him say things like fake news, calling back to Hitler saying lying press. That would be how you would do like a heightening of that character. But Trump just comes out and just fucking does it. He just takes the words out of your mouth and just says, no, I'll just fucking say it. I'll just say the thing that he said. I'm not going to do it in a dog whistle. I'm not going to couch it in something that has plausible deniability to it. I'm just going to say the exact same fucking thing that he said. I think all of this is meant to build up to a point where you become desensitized too, where we become lobotomized, where we can watch the image of Elon doing the Sig Heil on the stage and not be fazed by it. And just sort of be like, well, figures. That's where we are, I suppose. And I hope that all of that makes sense. That's my piece. We've got 350 people here, or some like 340 people-ish in the TikTok Digital Studio audience. How's everybody doing? I'm going to talk to the TikTok Digital Studio audience now. I'll probably put some of this conversation in the YouTube version, but the fullness of this conversation, if you want to watch this full segment, go to www.patreon.com/AustinArcher. This will be on my Patreon, the extended full version. Usually there's about 30 more minutes of extra bonus content. If you're into that sort of thing, if you really liked this conversation and you just need more of it and you want to hear what the digital studio audience over here on TikTok has to say, then check out Patreon, patreon.com/AustinArcher. Support the show. Shout out to all the Patreon patrons. You guys rule. Thank you for your support. Thank you for keeping these things alive, especially in a time like this, in a time where like our communication platforms are not guaranteed. The government has shown us that they can turn them on and off at will. They've shown us that the leaders of most of our communication platforms and social media platforms are already in the pocket of the Trump administration. They've shown us that their agenda does not align with ours, and they've shown us that they, see our organizing and our community building as a threat. So if you want to make it so that creators like me can continue doing this work and continue sounding the alarm and getting the word out there, and you have the means to do so, consider checking me out on Patreon. All right, let's go over to the TikTok audience. What are you guys thinking over here? Danny asks, Austin, what's your background? You are so intelligent. I said this on the episode last week. I'm not actually that smart. I just know how to yap. I'm good at talking. I'm an actor and a writer and like a musician and like a dancer. I was a musical theater major in college. I don't really have any real political expertise. I'm not like an expert political strategist. There are people who know so much more about activism and strategy than I do. There are people who know more about policy than I do. I just know how to package an argument. I just know how to yap. Like, I'd make a great lawyer. I just got a fucking motor on my mouth, dude. And that's what makes me a good content creator, is like, you got to be able to yap. If you want to have a podcast, if you want to have a YouTube channel, if you want to have a TikTok channel, and you want to do all the things that I do, comedy and songwriting, and, you got to be able to yap. No Taboo asks, is neoliberal economic policy pushing the majority towards economic conditions similar to 1930s Germany? you would have to talk to someone who's an expert in neoliberal economic policy for that question. I said this on last week's episode as well, and I think it always bears repeating. I think that there's this common feeling amongst audience members sometimes that just because a person is outspoken about sociopolitical advocacy and sociopolitical issues, that means that they have a responsibility to be an expert on every single aspect of sociopolitical advocacy. And I just don't think that that's a reasonable expectation of people. Like, there are going to be different people who have an expertise in different areas. There are going to be people who know every single aspect of the history of Israel and Palestine. There are going to be people who know every single aspect of the civil rights struggle in the 20th century and the modern civil rights struggle with the Black Lives Matter movement. There are going to be people who are experts in the history of like trans visibility and trans inclusion and stuff like that. And there are going to be people whose expertise and specialty is neoliberal economic policy and how that is interplaying with the rise of totalitarian fascism and Christian nationalism in the United States. What this question sounds like to me is sort of a both sides thing of like, aren't the Democrats just as responsible as the Republicans? And I would point you in the direction of That Nick Powers Guy. If you don't already know this creator, his name is That Nick Powers Guy. I'll put his name on the screen for the Patreon watchers, or if this question makes it to YouTube. This person is really, really good at breaking down the difference between the two parties. Nick does a really good job of gathering the receipts of what Democrats actually vote for versus what Republicans vote for, what kind of legislation Democrats put forward versus what kind of legislation Republicans put forward, what kind of budgets Democrats vote to approve versus what kind of budgets Republicans vote to approve. And the evidence is pretty clear when you actually bother to go and look at it, that these two political forces are pulling in different directions and that they are trying to accomplish different goals and that they're not working in tandem. Now, the other thing about the Democratic Party is a lot of far left people feel like it doesn't serve them because it doesn't cater specifically and only and exclusively to them. So Democrats will put something into a campaign and on their platform that's meant to cater to far left progressives, but then they'll also put stuff in their platform that caters to moderates and people in the center. And far left people see that as a betrayal. They go, no, you need to only cater your platform to me. You need to only cater your platform to push as far in the left progressive direction as you possibly can. Not realizing that the far left position is only occupied by like maybe 10 million people, maybe 10 to 15 million, and that's being generous. Like, there's a reason why Jill Stein has a hard time getting 1% of the vote every time she comes and shows up in an election to steal votes and to disrupt things and ruin and spoil things for the Democrats. The reason why the Democrats have to have a platform that caters to the center and to people left of center and to neoliberalism and to far left progressives and try to spread the issues out is because they're trying to create a platform and an agenda that can appeal to a base of like 80 million people. And so you have to have a diversity of ideas in there, but make no mistake, they are still all ideas that are pulling away in sharp contrast to the ideas that are being presented by the Republican Party. And boy, if I wasn't trying to fucking get that message out during this last election cycle, but people didn't want to listen to me. They just kept calling me a neo shitlib and stuff like that. And here we are. We got Nazis in the White House, and that's what I was trying to tell you. But it is what it is. February Femme says, "You so sassy. I love it." I do get a little sassy sometimes when I'm doing the talk back portion of the show. Aurora Beam says, "We need someone who's so wildly extreme left. We got to move that Overton window." Absolutely. We do need to move the Overton window. You know what doesn't help in moving the Overton window? Losing elections. So far left people are always advocating for like further left candidates. We got to push the Overton window over. What you need to do to push the Overton window is win elections. And what's frustrating is, and this was my message the entire election cycle, is we actually have the numbers to do it when we show up. The reason why we fucking kicked their asses in 2020 is because we showed up. We showed up. Like, when we show up, we win in a landslide. When we work as a unified coalition, we are unbeatable. Like, we do not lose when we show up. The problem is we're such a diverse coalition of voters. We're so much more diverse than the right is. It's really hard to get us all on the same strategic page. It's really hard to get us all pulling in the same direction. And third-party voters and independent voters are always trying to get 75 million of us to go with them them, they're all like, you guys need to get on the page of the 2 million of us instead of the 2 million of them getting on board with the 75 million of everyone else. And it's like, the math just doesn't math. It's like, we're going to have a much easier time getting 2 million of you to join the 75 million than you are going to get the 75 million to join you. Like it just, you got to go with percentages and math. And if you want to shift that Overton window, the way that you can do it is voting consistently as a unified coalition, election cycle after election cycle. And people hate hearing that. They hate hearing that the solution is just vote harder. They fucking hate that. But I'm sorry, it is the solution. And it's not just vote harder. It's fucking vote at all. What happened in the 2024 election is about 6 million people who turned up for Joe Biden in 2020 did not turn up for Kamala Harris. And so when you lose 6 million people to apathy or to the feeling that, they got to break the system by going with a third party, or that they feel like they ethically and morally can't support the genocide in Gaza, even though you're absolutely supporting it and you're absolutely letting it get exponentially worse by letting Donald Trump lose. You're just deluding yourself by pretending like you're not participating, but you are. What happens is you get where we are. You get far-right authoritarian fascism and extremism, and the Overton window goes even further to the right than it already is. You want to shift the Overton window to the left? Win fucking elections. Show up and vote. Did Trump have more voters in 2024? Barely. He had the final tally was 76 point something to 75 million. It was 75 point something to 73.5 or something. It was very close. Channel Dave asks, why do you think you're allowed to be live and talking like this right now? And the answer to that question is, we're very lucky that I am. I said this last week too. The last 2 weeks that I've been doing this show, this is the most people I've ever had in my audience on a live stream. I have 1.4 million followers on this platform, and I've been going live for the last 5 years, and regularly TikTok has suppressed my lives, and usually they don't let more than 50 or 70 people at a time watch my live streams. These are record numbers for me, and these aren't even that big of numbers for people who stream regularly on TikTok. But the fact that this new TikTok algorithm post-ban is allowing these conversations to happen and allowing them to be seen by more people, even while I'm advertising other platforms, which you should go follow. I don't know what it means. It sort of scares me in a weird, nefarious kind of way, because I'm like, you guys have never let me get away with this. You've never let me get away with promoting my podcast or promoting my YouTube channel. How come you're all of a sudden allowing me to get away with it? What does that mean? Does it mean I'm going on some kind of list or going into some kind of registry? I don't know. Is this all being documented? Am I being watched right now by agents of Trump's Gestapo? I don't fucking know what it means, but I do know that while I have a voice, I'm going to continue yapping. While I have people listening, I'm going to continue talking. Somebody else asked, just got here, sorry if you already answered, but what are your thoughts on leaving the country? That's what I mean by while I still can. While I still have a channel and a platform, I'm going to use it to speak truth to power. While I still have a voice, I'm going to use it to yap about what's going on and point at the Nazis and say, those are Nazis right there. Everybody look at the Nazis doing Nazi shit. And I'm going to do it until they cut me off, until they turn off my channels, until they come and get me, or until I'm forced to leave the country. So this question about leaving the country, it's something I've talked about extensively with my family. It's something I've talked about with my significant other. It's not out of the question. It's something that is on the, it's like a thing that we look at. We look at countries that we would potentially be open to moving to. We think about careers that we could pursue in different countries and what we could be good at. And I would advise you to as well. I think that we should stay here if you can. I think you should stay here and fight and resist. Lindo Star says, what do you say when someone says Vance can't be a Nazi, his wife isn't white? I say Jeff Mead's a Nazi. I say Vivek Ramaswamy's a Nazi. I say Nick Fuentes, who has Latino people in his family, is an open and avowed Nazi. I say Candace Owens is a Nazi. The 21st century modern American Nazi party looks different from the one in 1920s and 1930s history, Germany, but only slightly so. It's just full of more bootlickers and more useful idiots than 1920s and 1930s Germany was. But still, these people are in the vast minority. They're in the minority. Like, the vast majority of people in marginalized communities that are typically targeted by Nazis don't support what they're doing. But like, there are Jewish people that support them. There are queer people that support them, trans people that support them. There are, there's Caitlyn Jenner. They're like, just because JD Vance's wife isn't white doesn't mean JD Vance is not currently in league with and partnered with Nazis, with full-blown Nazis. And someone's whatever layers of marginalization a person carries, it does not automatically exclude them from being able to uphold Nazism and push forward the cause of Nazism. But the end goal is still the same. The end goal is still a white ethno-state for straight people, for straight Christian white people, where white straight Christian men are in charge. So all of these people are absolutely, snails for salt. They are absolutely people voting for the leopards who eat people's faces party, who are about to get their faces eaten by leopards. But it doesn't mean that they're not Nazis. I think that'll do it. I want to go watch the end of this football game I've had on pause for the last hour and 20 minutes and see how it turns out. Nobody tell me the ending. Thank you so much for a very lively conversation. TikTok Digital Studio audience, you guys crushed it. Those were some amazing questions and feedback. What a great conversation. We had almost 300 people here for a lot of the show. That's fantastic. We got 75,000 likes on the live stream. You guys rocked it. Go follow me on YouTube and subscribe. Make sure you're following the show over there in case, this platform gets taken away. It's good to have footholds in lots of different platforms. My Instagram just went over 100,000 today. I have a new wrinkle on why we should stay on Meta, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to support Mark Zuckerberg. Meta pays their creators quite well, and it's pretty cool to make Mark Zuckerberg pay people like me money. To be like, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want channels like mine doing well, and to go over there and be like, I'm going to make Mark Zuckerberg's company give channels like leftist channels and progressive channels money. I think that's a good reason. I think that's a good reason to stay on Meta, is be like, I'm going to make sure Meta has to pay the people that they don't want on their platform. So make Zuck pay me. Go follow me on Instagram. Make YouTube pay me. Go follow me on YouTube. Make TikTok pay me. Watch my videos and share them. And do the same for all of your favorite leftist and progressive creators. Let's keep this shit rolling. Let's keep pushing back. Let's keep saying things that are true unabashedly. Yeah, and that's it. That's it, y'all. People Pleaser is written, edited, hosted, and produced by me, Austin Archer, with original theme music also by ya boy. You can find more of my music by going to austin-archer.com, looking up Austin Archer on streaming platforms, or by going to austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com. All of that is linked in the description of this video. You can also find my new podcast, The Oneer Podcast, that I do with my best friend Kramer England, where we just talk about movies. If all of this political talk is just weighing you down and you're like, bro, enough already, just talk about something that's not so political. There's a whole ass new show that I started where we're just talking about movies. We're just yapping about movies, and it's something I really like talking about, and we've been doing the show for a while now. You can subscribe to that channel on YouTube and listen to that show or watch the episodes of that show. I'll link that in the description. Patreon.com/Austin Archer if you want to support this show. Shout out to the Patreon patrons. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, everybody, until next time, stay vigilant, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be nice out there. Find some peace when you can. Take moments to rest. They're trying to overwhelm you with chaos. Breathe when you can. Laugh when you can. Find joy when you can. We'll see you next time. Love you so much. Bye-bye.